Okay, let's make a start while the next slide is loading. Good evening, everyone. Warm welcome to the Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University, and welcome to the fifth in the lecture series, Architecture and Design for Society, which are a series of lectures that are ongoing through academic year 2025. Before commencing this evening's lecture, Gary and Yi, a little patience please with a few introductions and formalities to go through. First of all, the Architecture and Design for Society lecture series welcomes esteemed local and international speakers from various design disciplines to share expertise, insights and scholarship in design and research that addresses human and environmental issues for the benefit of society. For participants here who are licensed architects or professionals, attendance at each lecture can be counted towards continuing professional development, CPD points. I'm not sure that applies to myself as a UK architect. I hope so, because I've got to catch up quite a lot. Participants who attend the lectures, more than 80% of all lectures during the first semester of the 2025 academic year, will receive a certificate of completion as proof of participation and may accumulate credit bank units. And those can later be transferred towards academic credits in the Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University. The Faculty of Architecture would like to thank Sakultai Company Limited, you just saw the video, their company presentation, for supporting, giving their kind support to this valuable academic activity. Could I now invite Deputy Dean Associate Professor Dr. Wari-Cha Wongpayat to say a few words and open this event and give a small souvenir to our guests this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and warm welcome to the Architecture and Design for Society Lecture Series 2025 here at the Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University. On behalf of the faculty, I am very pleased to welcome our distinguished guests from the University of Southern California School of Architecture, who are here as part of a collaborative workshop with INTA, starting from October 6th until this coming Friday. We are very honored to host a group of 20 fourth-year undergrad students from USC, led by Professor of Practice Gary Paige, who is the director of the Asian Architecture, Landscape, and Urbanism program, and Adjunct Associate Professor Eui-Sung, design partner at Morphosis Architects and director of the Now Institute. That visit marks an important collaboration between the USC and Chulalongkorn University, fostering international exchange and shared inquiry into design, sustainability, and future urbanism. This evening lecture entitled The Fortified Lens, Research and Design as Practice, extend that partnership into the public sphere. We are honored to have them with us and grateful for their contribution to our students and to the wider Faculty of Architecture community. Thank you, Inda, for hosting this special lecture, and thank you, Ajahn Will, for being our MC tonight. Please join me in welcoming Professor Gary Paige and Professor Eui-Sung.
Introduction, Dr. Wari-Cha. I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speakers, Professors Gary Paige and Eui-Sung, or Yi, as I think we've been calling him through the last 3 weeks, both from the University of Southern California, USC. Some of their students, I think, behind me here. A little bit of an introduction already has been given. So Gary Paige is Professor of Practice at USC, where he also directs the Asian Architecture, Landscape and Urbanism program. He's also founder of GPS, Gary Paige Studio, a Los Angeles-based multidisciplinary firm with a portfolio ranging in scale in media, from art installations and architecture to furniture and graphic design. Work of the studio centres around research as a mode of critical spatial inquiry as architectural practice. exemplified through projects such as the CAP Library and Freight Depot at SciArc and installations at the Venice Biennale. Gary's architecture drawings and photographs have been exhibited and published internationally, and he has taught also at Kyoto, Seika University and Shenzhen University. Eui-Sung Yi is a partner at Morphosis Architects for, I think you said 20 years or more, yeah? And director of the Now Institute, which is the urban research wing at Morphosis Architects, and committed to partnering with entities that have limited resources for strategy development and envisioning. With 30 years of professional practice, he spearheads Morphosis' architectural urban operations in Asia and the Middle East. His completed portfolio ranges from the new Korean embassy in Tokyo, the tallest detached core skyscraper in the world, to the regional master plan for NEOM and the Line in Saudi Arabia, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Yi's professional work and scholarship speculate on the spatial dynamics of emerging global and Asian urbanism. As Dr. Waricha mentioned, at INDA we've had the pleasure of hosting and collaborating with Gary and Yi and their USC students over the past 3 weeks as part of their 2025 field study, The Anatomy of Urban Space in the Asian City. We have watched them study and document Bangkok streets and bring fresh perspectives forward in speculative transformations of the shophouse format. They have a final pin-up on Friday morning. Can I say that? Yeah?
I was going to say it.
Yeah? Okay, great. So because anyone can join that, I think that would be really interesting to see their work. Without giving too much away, today's lecture is titled The Fortified Lens, Research and Design as Practice, and explores how architecture can act as both research and design. I believe Gary is looking at a project called the Flux Zone that USC students worked on, and I think you will be talking a little bit more perhaps about the work of Morphosis. Is that correct? Okay, so I've said enough. Please join me in welcoming Gary and Yi. Thank you.
Thank you, Will, for the introduction. And thank you to Ken for inviting us to speak this evening. And let me begin by saying it's been an enjoyable and productive 2 weeks here in Bangkok, 2.5 weeks, really. And I'd like to thank everyone from leadership, students, staff, faculty for their hospitality. I hope everyone will come by the 13th floor at the INDA Lab on Friday morning to see the work, the workshop review and projects. Okay. So I'm going to do something a bit unusual this afternoon. That's speak about one project and one project only, but hopefully in some depth. I gave a version of this talk in Tokyo a while ago, and the title I used was Performance and Form. I mention this because while I'm still interested in that idea, I've come to realize that collaboration is a very significant point of contact between teaching and my architectural practice. I've had the opportunity to work on, as Will said, several design build projects with my students at SciArc and later at USC, including an installation for the Biennale, the SciArc Freight Depot building, and the project I'll be speaking about this afternoon, a collaborative design research project for a net zero solar house for the U.S. decathlon. So this is the USC entry that we worked on over a period of 2 years, and designed, built, and operated collaboratively. So to begin, I'd like to discuss our design research, the design process, and the procedure of constructing it, first on the USC campus, and then at the Great Park in Orange County. I have a couple of hundred slides, so I'm going to move at a brisk pace. So first, what is a solar decathlon? It's a competition sponsored by the U.S. Department of Energy that challenges teams of university students to design, build, and operate a 93 square meter solar powered house that is affordable, energy efficient, innovative, and net zero. And by net zero, we're referring to a building that with zero energy consumption and zero carbon emissions annually, and one that produces more energy that it uses. So every 2 years, the DOE, Department of Energy, selects 20 teams to compete in the solar decathlon. The winner of each competition is the team that best blends cost effectiveness, consumer appeal, and design excellence with optimal energy production and maximum efficiency. This is a view of the mall in Washington, D.C. during a 2-week-long competition period. The houses are open to the public and judged in the following 10 categories. So, architecture, affordability, market appeal, comfort zone, engineering, hot water, communication, appliances, energy bill, and home entertainment. So it's a true decathlon. There's 10 contests worth 100 points each, which adds up to a 1,000-point total. So one of the key principles underlying the studio pedagogy for this project is the following. Architecture is a process of pure and applied research. So to get started, one of the first things that we do is to establish an agenda for research. And that is, we make observations, we try to define what the problem is, we ask what are the essential architectural questions, and as a team, we ask what are we interested in examining. Typically, it involves looking at the site, program, typology, budget, but also, as importantly, even more so, is outlining a set of interests that are both architectural and non-architectural that serve as a basis or framework for the work. We also try to approach the research in a broad and comprehensive manner that is looking at a diverse set of sources from art, architecture, science, and technology, as well as popular culture. So this is the dedicated studio space we set up at USC that we worked in for a period of a year and a half. So site. To say the Earth is the site seems like a bit of a stretch. However, for a project concerned with sustainability, energy efficiency, and culture, we wanted to look beyond property lines and boundaries to understand the situation in a broader or more comprehensive framework. Also, we're interested in data points in a broad spectrum of modes of visualization that include various mapping and photography techniques that enable us to see the world in different ways and to make what was once invisible visible. So this is a satellite photo of North America at night, a NASA photograph. Another strategy that we employ involves scaling or zooming, looking at something from afar and zooming in, or conversely, looking at something through a microscope and zooming out. These are two satellite photos showing the browning of vegetation across Southern California after the spring season rains have ended. Another NASA satellite photo showing clouds of smoke produced by Southern California wildfires. And we also asked, since the project is located in Southern California, what are some of the key attributes that characterize the city? Horizontality, grid formations and topographical change, variable densities, microclimates, cultural multiplicity, and alternate living scenarios or dwelling scenarios are things that we looked at. One of the mandates of the competition is to design a prototypical house for the region and climate and environment that your university is located in. So if your university was in Indiana, you would be designing for that environment, that climatic zone. The year we participated was unique because the site wasn't in Washington, D.C., which is where it had been previously in previous years. It was in Orange County, and of the 20 schools that were participating, we were the closest one. There was a school from Austria, there was a school from the Czech Republic, and although it's a challenging competition, I have to say their challenge was greater because they had to have the house in a shipping container on a ship to U.S. while we were still building the first prototype on campus. So hats off to them, and both of those teams, I have to say, did a really terrific job. We felt a certain burden or pressure because University of Southern California, we are the Southern California school, designing and building a project in Southern California and Orange County specifically. So we were looking at suburban sprawl and unsustainable growth as a problem, as an issue. And this photograph picks some of the ingredients that contribute to that: the freeway, the strip mall, tract houses, and a plot of public green space that no one can really access. Another example, the site for the competition was the Orange County Great Park, which was the former El Toro Marine Corps Air Station that was decommissioned in 1999 and donated to the city of Irvine. It has 4 runways, which you can see here, and is approximately 5,000 acres in area. So one of the runways was the site for the 20 teams. You can see 2 maps, one at the bottom with the USC site in the middle there, and then the larger map showing the relationship to the runway. And this is an aerial view of the runway with 20 sites in the foreground. So, like I said, in our research phase, we like to look at a broad spectrum of source material. Architecture with a capital A, vernacular architecture. We also look to the sciences and arts, popular culture, and other sources. So we're interested in site and geography, but we're also interested in other various contexts such as social, cultural, and environmental. We collect images to understand the diversity of a place. This includes image cliches, stereotypes, but also works that capture a vibe or atmosphere of a time and place. In this case, a painting by the Los Angeles artist Ed Ruscha that looks at the famous LA icon, the Hollywood sign, from another point of view, which is the backside. A poster for the famous Southern California surf movie, Endless Summer. Cultural context, swimming pools, the Southern California backyard oasis. The environmental and ecological context, landscapes which simultaneously are natural and artificial. In this case, a natural one in the high desert, Joshua Tree National Park, and an artificial landscape, the ubiquitous water sprinkler irrigating the suburban front lawn. And the ocean. Southern California has a unique climate and microclimates which are the result of its geography and proximity to the Pacific Ocean. Another issue that we look closely at, I think, not only in this project, but every project that my studio's involved with at USC and SCIARC before that, is representation and the various tools available for visualization and representation. So in this case, mapping flows and flow visualization was one of our interests. Mapping things that were changing. So again, like the satellite photos that I showed earlier, part of our research involves trying to see unseen or immaterial phenomena and forces, particularly as it pertains to the changing state of things like air, light, space, fluids, etc. So fluid dynamics, mixing and remixing, vector fields and flow patterns, fluid dynamics and vectors that describe forces, turbulent flow visualization, in this case smoke and wind, diagram of estimated energy flows, and a map describing another site, the Pacific Rim, which more specifically, two different flight paths. You'll note that they are different, one taking advantage of the geographical distance, while the other uses the path of the jet stream or tailwinds to map a route. We became interested in our inquiry in subtraction. That must surprise some of the USC students, huh? And things, porosity, or stuff with holes. So we looked at natural organisms and inorganic objects to understand how they work or perform. This is a sea sponge, a plan of an automobile intake manifold, two entitled sculptures by Tom Friedman, one on the left additive, with kind of equivalent amount of figure and void space, and the other subtractive and entropic, a school chair that he took and drilled holes into the point of near collapsing. And finally, a land art sculpture by the artist Michael Heiser, which is a continuous frame of reference for work that I'm involved with, double negative, and two images, one the aerial showing the first negative, which is the natural gorge at Mormon Mesa, and then the second negative, which you see depicted from the point of view that spans the gorge, which is a line that he created through dynamiting and bulldozing the earth to create a line that spans the gorge that is the length of the Empire State Building. So a critical work, an innovative work, a work that I've continued to mine, I think, in my research, because it's about space, really, as opposed to an object or a figure or even geometry. Architectural precedents included vernacular housing typologies in Southern California, such as craftsman bungalows and courtyard housing. In both instances, we saw an organization of room or zones arranged around a central social space that can be used in different ways. In the bungalow, depicted here on the left, we learned about the value of porches as shading devices and intermediate spaces or gray zones between interior and exterior spaces. USC professor Ralph Knoll's research on solar envelopes and form finding, where he started with simple primitives and then faceted, beveled, chamfered them in a manner that responds to the movement of the sun. And then another example that we see in Japan with their solar codes. And one of the reasons why the buildings, so many buildings in Tokyo have these unique chamfers or bevels at the top, which are not aesthetic conceits, but rather driven by code requirements for how many hours of available sunlight that you're stipulated to make sure your neighbor receives. So the form is more of a determinant, which is a determinant of massing, is driven by performance, hence the title, Performance in Form. The second pedagogical principle that became our mantra is that architecture is a mode of critical spatial inquiry and practice. And this slide just illustrates some spatial concepts of the double negative and how volumes could be nested, tunneled, intersecting with one another, almost like a manifold, an idea that we would return to in the design process, in the conceptual design phase. So our research and observations led to a spatial concept that celebrates the various forms of change that are such a vital part of our culture, which led to the following statement. Our world is changing fast. Change, in fact, is ubiquitous in our contemporary experience. The different changes, climate, social, technological, cultural, and change more specifically to California and Southern California in the formation of the nuclear family are prevalent. So we were trying to look at alternate living scenarios that reflected contemporary lifestyles, but also as part of a global condition which you see well, I know in Tokyo for sure, but other cities that define life in the 21st century. Some notes on process. So we use this research as a point of departure, beginning with a simple yet efficient primitive or mass that measures approximately 10 by 10 meters. And then subtracted portions from it to channel air and light into the house. Again, the idea that I just showed of porosity and flow is central to any passive energy design premise. So from the beginning, we wanted to make it a focus on the massing of the house and part of the performance criteria. Here's another lower view showing some of the beveling, chamfering, coring, and tunneling to achieve that. And then the jump or leap, the translation into physical models. So these are some early models that I'll flip through pretty quickly that start exploring this idea of voids in z-axis intersecting with voids in the x and y axis. This is another version where the program is organized around a courtyard space, but also a courtyard space that becomes an open multi-purpose flux space is what we call that. A space that can change and be used for different activities. The exterior envelope, and so while we're still working with the spatial organization and concept, we're looking at the exterior envelope, knowing that how we modulate light, air, is going to be an important part of the project. We tried to do as much as we could with passive solar design, knowing that it's going to cost less than active systems. And even though we were required to have active systems and had two of the best engineering teams you could ever hope for, which is Overup and Burrow-Happold, working with us, one of the things that we found is that some of their work is so advanced and occurs at a much larger scale that it was challenging for them to try and figure out how to adapt that technology to a competition proposal that, as one of the competitions has this $249,000 maximum on it. So if you exceed that budget, you start losing points. It gets back to one of the 10 competition, or one of the 10 contests in the competition, which is affordability. Yeah. So the house is not only intended to perform at a really high level, but it's got to be affordable. Another model that's beginning to look at the relationship between interior and exterior zones. We're also starting to think about how we construct and transport this to Orange County. And so you have 3 linear modules that fit on flatbed trailers, which you'll see a bit later. Again, intersecting voids or double negatives, framing models to study the system of construction and prefabricated assembly. So again, a reminder that we're constructing the house on campus and having to transport it to Orange County and reassemble it in 8 days. So issues such as how much each module weighs, how they come apart and go back together, very important. Studies of perforated envelope systems, using various software to generate variable patterns. It's another more figurative pattern. Full-scale mock-up under construction in the USC courtyard. And then design teams we had, probably anywhere from 20 to 30 students working on this. So we had different teams organized so we were really in a kind of a privileged position to really explore visualization and modeling tools and do as much experimentation that we could afford to do. So this is a prototype with the operable shutters that are perforated and respond to different solar orientation. Interior views, trying to model or show some of the effects. Studies involving the idea of chromatic space, so looking at tinted skylights. Shutter envelope system permits the homeowner to control the amount of privacy, breezes, and light. So instead of highly automated systems, we wanted to look at things that were lower tech and easy for users to control. Another view showing the relationship between interior surfaces and exterior envelope systems, pixelation, perforation. And we were using, this was a little while ago, but software, Photoshop and Grasshopper to generate some of the imagery and do the fabrication. Light and dark spaces. It's another alternate model, riffing off of Mises' 50 by 50 house. We did the 27 by 27 house, which I still like, even though we didn't go with that one. Loft, inhabitable poche, including the service cores and storage walls flanking two sides. And then this idea of the house as a manifold, a more porous and open volume, in this case clad with reclaimed lumber. Louvers on the west-facing elevation, oversized openings to connect with the outdoors. Hopefully a critical take on the bungalow and courtyard house. And then later, as we start thinking about it, even some of the case study houses, where we tried to put in systems in place that didn't mediate as much between inside and outside, but allowed you to literally slide open doors that would allow the inside in, and also the solar chimney here for venting hot air and admitting light. Spent a lot of time on interiors and kind of designing the project from the interior, looking at the courtyard or the flux space. Also indirect lighting mixed with natural lighting to produce atmospheres. Yeah, so here's an example of indirect LED light sources. Tracking sunlight, various types a day, nighttime. So one of the contests that the Solar Decathlon had is that you had to show a movie at night. I mean, so the competition, a large part of it has to do with how the house performs. So you have to operate the house, and you either gain points or lose points based on the performance. So having a home control system was an important part of one of the competitions. This is a simulation of movie night. This we're studying the placement of various sliding partitions, transparent and translucent, look at other ways of opening and closing spaces. Yeah, this is when I think we were starting to think some about the case study houses, and this is a kind of case study 2.0 project. The ramp is part, because the house has to be ADA accessible, so the ramp is part of an oversized landing and an extended porch space. View of the PV array from above and three volumes, and then this roof that creates a carport. So those were some of the versions that we generated. However, at some point, you have to commit to an idea and start the process of developing the design and producing the construction documents. And this, unfortunately, I don't have any shots of that, but we had, I think, in the final set, just in part because of the DOE requirements, over 100 sheets, which is crazy given the fact that some of the case study houses were built with 4 sheets or 6 sheets, the famous case study houses in Southern California. So we're looking at a range of different precedents architecturally, diagramming, the precedents and how it leads to our proposal, site plan and some generative and analytical diagrams, the whole issue of affordability, and so we were working with a cost estimator, and making decisions that are informed by a budget for sure. Energy analysis, understanding our environmental context, research and design options for energy systems, natural and artificial lighting strategies, options for different mechanical systems, passive design strategies to try and achieve the net zero energy balance, energy efficient appliances and fixtures. So we had to quantify the usage of each appliance. Communication and branding. One of the competitions was communication, and so we had to design logos, operate websites. This is the website. This is the interior view from the south porch. And now we're sort of honing in more on the design that's going to be built after going through some of those different criteria. We even had to operate a Facebook page, which we ended up with the most likes. That was one we won. Physical model showing the PV panels and operable skylights, the skylight for the solar chimney and the open air shower. So the dark are the PV arrays, and then the central void is a operable skylight, and then the smaller one is an open air shower and an oversized bathroom for a small house with a 2-person soak tub, which you'll see in a bit. We're starting to look at rain screed facades. This is an example of a pixelated, or what we call the pixelated rain screen envelope. And then a section model showing 2 of the 3 prefabricated modules. The south-facing porch with the entertainment center and the bathroom core. And then we built models at all different scales because this is the first time the students were building a full-scale project. And so we did this one, I think, which was maybe 3 inches equals a foot of one of the modules, where we even 3D printed all the ductwork, the toilets, all the mechanical systems, everything. You can see a hot water heater there. Another perforated rain screen option, and then the booklet. So every team had to produce a project booklet. And if you look closely, you'll know we're always testing out different envelope systems. So the integration of active, passive systems, the engineering, the relationship between the architecture and engineering, and how this is an integrated system. And then the amenities in various systems, the final floor plan, our foray into mass customization and transformability. So we had a custom-made living room sofa that could be configured in, I think 32 different ways. And, we even got, I could show 20 slides just on this darn sofa. But we use different fabrics, different patterns, again, to try and reflect, I think, some of the culture, the multiplicity of cultures that are part of Los Angeles. Again, the contest stipulated that you had to be very precise in pointing out the amenities, the energy-saving elements, and what was innovative. So it's easy to say a project's innovative, right? But when you have to point to it and kind of defend it, and it's something else, and something I think we all learned a great deal from. So oversized sliding doors, you know, the mass customized furniture system, furniture that was recycled or reclaimed wood, so there's a sustainability narrative, east-facing breakfast porch, oversized folding and sliding window walls, folding so that the entire opening could be open to the outdoors as opposed to a sliding situation where you're only going to get 50% or 33% or 25%. We really were trying to hang on to that model idea of having an opening that is truly an opening to the outdoors. The open-air shower view of above and recycled glass mosaic tile. And then the sliding glass pocket door for the breezeway that was translucent. Small bit of hokusai and eames in the foreground and background, actually, which is our nod to Charles and Ray Eames, who worked in Southern California and of course, were the authors and architects of the famous Eames case study house. The aluminum and galvalume cladding, which didn't cost as much as all of the pixelated rain screen facade systems that we designed and even mocked up in some instances. The breakfast porch, so bifold shading system, LED lighting, bamboo floors, folding bunk beds. Because the bedrooms are quite small, we wanted to keep them compact so that people would have to spend time in the communal, multi-purpose flux spaces. And one way we deal with that is furniture that would fold up, but oversized floor-to-ceiling heights, and then doors that slide open to open the entire space. Some shots of context. It's the view looking into the living room from the front porch. East porch at dusk. Yeah, more envelope studies. And then at this point, we started construction on the lawn adjacent to the School of Architecture. So it's for the USC students, this is the former South Lawn next to the architecture building where the Eui-Sung Academy currently is. And so the grid of seismic piers for the prefabricated modules, steel frame getting craned into the site, lifted and bolted in place. This all happened in a matter of hours instead of days. Joist hangers getting welded into place, the steel frame, team members priming the steel frame, and then, of course, one of my favorite shots, our Mies moment, recalling something that Frank Gehry famously said, buildings usually look best when they're incomplete. And, you know, Farnsworth at night, yeah. It's again, nice shot on the south lawn. Lumber getting delivered to the site, and floor and roof joists in place. Still pretty Miesian. And more welding. Roof getting sheathed and the solar chimney getting boxed out. Roofing substrate getting applied. PVC roofing material with plumbing vents and the cylinder for the sun tunnel skylight, plumbing and wiring, a lot of which the students learned how to do with the guidance of an electrical contractor. So a number of the architecture students came away with an ability to do the plumbing and some of the wiring for the house, and also how to wire a PV system. The in-wall tank system. I was just talking about this afternoon. And then setting the rails for the photovoltaics, roof with vents, sun tunnel, skylight. Extensive use of 3 types of lighting: top lighting, side lighting, and even some reflected up lighting, which I'll show you in the completed work. This is kind of an important moment. The first photovoltaic panels and sun tunnel skylight are set. Duct work, and then fast forward to the Great Park in Orange County. So this is student members of the installation team arriving. We even had to design the T-shirts. That's part of the competition, the graphics part of the competition, that each team had to design a logo, a slogan, and T-shirt, and all that other stuff I showed. This is our advanced team. The first orientation meeting in one of the hangars, an early morning site walk on what was a blazing day on the tarmac, I will tell you. Strategizing. Oh, this is Tyler's pickup truck where we were hauling stuff in pickup trucks and U-Hauls. This is some of the equipment arriving. The cranes. And so this is how most of the schools, I think there were only 2 of us that took a different approach, which we used forklifts. And we did research on this. And if you were in Los Angeles at the time, there was a famous news item of showing the space shuttle being moved through the streets of Los Angeles in the middle of the night. And so we found the firm that did that moving, and they used forklifts. And you got extra points as part of one of the contests if you were the first school that had your house completed. You'd get bonus points, right? You had 8 days to build it on site here, but if you could do it in 6, you would get some additional points, which we decided to go after because we knew you were going to lose some points on one of the contests. It's inevitable, right? So we hired them, and they were fast, much faster than the cranes. So we're setting the seismic piers. That one's for E. Let's see. Verifying our dimensions with our contractor, John Cordick, shout out. This was a theoretical crap moment where we found out the runway is sloped for drainage, and they never told us this. We discovered it when we're installing the house, when the module's on the way. We have seismic piers that have been calibrated for a certain height that then we had to change on the spot, which was not as easy as it sounds like it should have been. Anyway, we got them set. The first module arrives. Instead of a crane, we decided to use the forklift. Here they're getting lifted into place. And the first one's set. This is not a good OSHA moment, but the alignment was pretty tricky. And yeah, okay. I won't say anything more about that. Second module getting set in place. The middle module. And interior finishing starts. You can see the kitchen cabinets and the galley kitchen with the refrigerator. So we moved a lot of things already installed just to make the installation quicker. Aerial view to give you a sense of the scope of the endeavor. This is an image of all the houses under construction. And again, bear in mind that we only had 1 week to reassemble them and make them operational. This is the third and final module arriving, checking alignments again. And this, if you look closely, you'll note that the back tires are off the ground. And what we, including the forklift operator, forgot to, just never got a part of the information, is that each module weighed different. And this one was by far the heaviest because all the energy equipment was in here. So that's okay. They just put counterweights on the back, and we were good to go. Student project manager getting interviewed by the local TV crew, students assembling the prefab aluminum ramps. This is a north ramp, which is getting connected to the house. Site meeting with the construction team. Lifting PVs into place, patching interior walls, cutting sheetrock, and the interior view of the splayed solar chimney for air and light. Tyler, one of the team members, wrestling with a storage tank, placing the USC banner. And so this is the house before the folding glass doors are installed in the south porch. Completed house with landscape element, Pellis verde tree there. South and east porches with living green walls, detailed aluminum and galvalume envelope and oversized casement windows. East porch with vertical herb garden, and clearly the wrong chairs for this project, but the chairs were lent to us, so we went with them. And a view of the interior with open plan living zone and kitchen zone, part of the sofa and the flexible flux space. The retractable skylight in a partially open position over the solar chimney for heat exhaust and natural ventilation, and obviously for a lot of natural light. And then the view looking towards the built entertainment center, recessed coves, indirect lighting, living room and custom sofa. Another nod to Eames in the foreground, a view of the solar chimney, the oversized sliding bedroom doors that I mentioned earlier, and then this foldable, bunk bed which folds up into the wall. The open-air bathroom and shower with a two-person soak tub. And finally, not the whole team, in a 2-year period, there were over 100 undergrad and graduate students that worked on this project. But a big word of acknowledgement and appreciation to the team that worked on the project, along with my tireless USC colleague, architect Alice Kim. And the amount that we learned was extraordinary. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. I want to first thank everybody here, especially the members and the leadership of Chulalongkorn University, of graciously being an amazing host and welcoming 23 lost architecture nomads wandering through Asia. So thank you very much. Thank you especially to Ken for coordinating this, and then of course to Will for welcoming me that very first evening in the middle of the night. I want to present a work that is completely connected with an academic pursuit. And the larger theme is research within an academic setting and how that actually became or is the real project. So I want to move away from this larger discussion that everything that we do in school is somehow abstract and academic and not connected to reality. I'm going to turn that upside down by showing you real life effects. So I lead 2 institutions. Morphosis is the architectural side, and if we have time, I could show you some more stuff. But the Now Institute is an urban consulting team that's based in academia. This is a photo of my office. We have about 50 people. On the Morphosis side and on the Now Institute side, we have about 6 studios worldwide, LA being the base. We have Beirut, Dubai, Seoul, and Shanghai. We've done over 222 projects across. And I show you this because one of the criteria for the way I hire people is their huge cultural intelligence, their ability to understand different people, different cultures. And the key word is how do you mix intelligence and empathy, right? And by having empathy, you have a connection. And across that, we've worked in 19 countries, which talks about now the larger cultural, the cultural sensitivity that we enter this. Our firm, first of all, was founded by Tom Main. So Tom right now is around 82 years old. And he's famous. There's only 3 American Pritzker Prize winners right now in the United States: Richard Meyer, Frank Gehry, and Tom Main. And Tom Main is, I would argue, is probably one of the most active ones right now, AI gold medal. And more critically, he was President Obama's main advisor. He's a prolific educator. He started the Southern California Institute of Architecture that Gary, of course, is also associated with. And it's one of those adages, like if I ask any faculty member anywhere in the world, like, would you still be teaching even if your practice is strong? If your business side is still strong, would you still teach? I would say about 80% said probably no. Tom continuously teaches even when the office is really busy, because he feels that it is actually part of his responsibility and his contribution back to the culture of architecture. This is him getting his Pritzker Prize. This is him with a certain American president. So he was a consultant for 2 of President Obama's terms. The current leadership is this group. I'm the guy in the middle. And the 4 of us who support Tom, we divide the world into different kind of like specific marketplaces. We're pretty prolific. I think we're like number 3 in terms of an architectural office that continuously prints out books. The book is not so much about a fetish object, but it helps us organize it. As many of you know, when the moment comes for you to like make a book, it forces you to like collect and reflect on everything that you've done. And it's a way of us kind of doing some sort of like a self-therapy. We are completely obsessed with building models. Everybody who works in our office, from A to Z, my job is to take them from a concept all the way to construction. We believe that if you have an amazing idea or amazing concept in architecture, that it is not equivalent to actually have that amazing idea on paper. It is not equivalent to actually having it built. For us, we always bias the built environment and the built experience. So for the duration of this talk, I'm going to focus on the Now Institute. The Morphosis side, we could talk about it more. You could see a lot more of it on social media. But on the Now Institute side, it's, I think, a little bit more applicable for today. We started in about 2002, and it began with us at UCLA, and we're looking at all our STEM brothers and sisters, STEM in the engineering school, in the medical school, and we're like, that team over there has a collaboration with some medical institution to create the next cancer drug. That engineering team is making the next carbon fiber wings for some futuristic airplane. Why is there no collaboration in terms of architecture and especially urban planning? And this is where we began to collect all the universities inside Los Angeles and create the Now Institute, which will actually branch out and work with every one of these governments. Every time we finish a work by the government, we publish a book that I would say is pictorially biased toward the popular audience. These are, I would say, these are not necessarily books for another academic audience or within my industry. It is meant to be communicative and very, very easy. The thing about doing architecture is that it's almost like a finite product. The audience level is highly curated and controlled. When you're doing a city, you are at the mercy of the complexity and the diversity of every member of the demographics, culturally, age-wise, economically, politically. And in many ways, how can you kind of respond to that? And you respond to that with understanding safe and resilient systems. So when we first began, we began to realize back like in 2003 and 4 that there's a huge benefit in terms of understanding spatial narratives that are constructed as architectural models. So for example, in this one, somebody say, you guys in Los Angeles, you have no Central Park, you have no park, you have no collective park. However, if we collect and amortize all the backyards of every single family residence, we actually have 41 central parks in terms of acreage. Or conversely, if I were to measure the spatial footprint of our beaches, that is actually equivalent to about 845 acres or our one central park in New York. So there is always now these spatial equivalencies that we make. And here, this is back in 2006 when a lot of the job market went out to China for fabrication and production, and we were left with a lot of warehouses. So what was the impact of that in LA? So we began to hold hands with the government. And the government of the urban planning department of LA would say, you know what, I always wanted to envision this part of the city to become this, or that part of the city to become that, but we have no money or the funding to actually help us envision or spatialize or create metrics. And so we began to work with them to create these spatial physical planning metrics. And then at the same time, we would go around and document culture. So there was always this collaboration between research that came out from spatial surveying and spatial research, plus the full understanding and the full cultural empathy of the diversity of different neighborhoods and different cultural groups. So I'm going to give you project by project as an example. The first one was New Orleans. And we call these projects, we have a city name, and we attach the word now. So in New Orleans, we were inundated with this huge hurricane called Katrina. And Katrina basically flooded this area called the Lower Ninth Ward. The Lower Ninth Ward was never meant for human habitation. It was a wetland, it was swampy, but because of certain kind of socioeconomic reasons, a lot of the demographics ended up living there. So when the city called us in, we kind of naively said, well, you know, maybe on your second round, you should just all densify in the higher grounds, which is what the gray area is. So for anybody who's been to New Orleans, there's a very famous area called the French Quarter. This is where all the tourists go. The French Quarter is where the gray area was, and because the French settlers, the Creole settlers, settled on the highlands, very, very common sense. The green is where economically it was much more affordable, and that's where the Lower Ninth Ward settled in, which is basically what was circled in yellow. Everybody there revolted against us. You're being insensitive, you're not being understanding of the larger cultural legacy. So we said, you're right. However, you do realize that like a Swiss clock, every 2.8 years, there is a hurricane that's going to hit you. Every 3 years on clock. What are you going to do about it? So we said, okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we make a special house for you that is basically a Noah's Ark? So why don't we make a house that will allow you for 3 weeks to use your toilet, to have drinking water, and to have electricity. And we'll call this a float house, and this will become the first prototype. So what we ended up doing was we ended up making like a chassis, like a car chassis, that would allow those metrics to actually be satisfied. On top of this chassis, anybody can put whatever house design they want. That's their culture, that's their own identity as a family, but on the basis is basically this chassis. And so with this chassis and with my students, we ended up creating this high-performance kind of a floating hull that we constructed with a high-performance floating foam that allowed it to be buoyant with all our systems in it. And this is being built in Westwood. And we shipped it across Texas, and we drove it all the way to New Orleans, and we finally built it. So now there's a lovely old couple that's living here. The roof is folded to completely collect rainwater and hurricane water when there's a storm. When it does flood, the house will float. It is actually anchored, so it only goes up and down. It's not like a boat where you could steer it to some other neighborhood, but it does allow you to stay buoyant and safe for 3 weeks. So this is what we do in the Now Institute. We have a problem. It is urban, it is spatial, and in this case, it's a grassroots effort, and it's real. So this is what we do. This is what could have happened if the lower Ninth Ward goes back to its wetlands. So moving forward, President Obama has this thing called the Grand Challenges. The Grand Challenges is where he identifies these huge problems facing all of humanity and assigns 2 of them to every American research university, to like Yale, University of Chicago, and to UCLA. UCLA got dementia, mental health, and urban sustainability. So we took on the lead in urban sustainability. This is from the White House, coming straight down for UCLA, and this was our mandate to kind of understand how to prototype a future LA. Yeah, as you can imagine, a huge group of basically professors who are in the sector of energy and green energy and resiliency. And Tom Main decided, okay, we're going to test this across a portion of the county into this one hyper area called Wilshire Boulevard. So the narrative that we told the other professors in engineering is this. We're going to have 1.5 million people coming to LA County. That shape is LA County. The white area on the lower bottom is the urbanized area. We're going to squeeze 1 million people out of the 1.5 inside this one corridor of 15 miles called the Wilshire Boulevard and make that as our high-density urban diagram. We're only going to basically impact 1% of the land and preserve 99% of the LA County as it is. So this now became this huge newspaper mantra, densify 1%, keep 99%, to kind of preserve the larger lifestyle. And in order for us to do this, we ended up focusing on that strip. So this is an aerial photo I took flying over LA. The series of high-rise buildings here, that is Wilshire Boulevard, and that is the street where we decided to now create this linear, sustainable urban prototype. And the first thing we ended up doing was creating a 3-dimensional live intelligent model spanning from the beach, which is on your left-hand side, all the way to where it terminates in downtown. Each volume, each polygon, each geometry is a live model that is cross-referenced with every metrics, how expensive it is, when it was built, how much energy it's actually producing, and so forth. And this became now like a living model. And this was connected with my friends over in ESRI. And then after this, there is a central subway line that was being built. I think it's going to almost be done by early next year, which is the Expo line. And so we're looking at different population strategies, and Tom decided to take this and do this. So this is nothing original. For anybody here who does urban design, this is the classic TOD, transit-oriented development. And we just decided to do a TOD across these major stations, Santa Monica, Century City, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Koreatown, and downtown. The one thing that we did want to do is to use each one of the TODs as a different organ, like in an animal. Okay, like if this was like a snake or a dragon or whatever metaphor you want to use, is one the lung, is the other one like the stomach, is the other one the brain, is one the muscle? Like, how can they start codepending upon each other to create this larger system as a forest as opposed to a tree? When you look at a building and say, okay, that building is sustainable, that's victory number one. But that's like understanding the tree. Now we're getting to a much more of a complex ecosystem where we have to understand the city literally, and I apologize for the cliche, like a forest, like an old-fashioned forest. You got the big trees, the small flowers, you got the happy bunny rabbits, and we're all trying to basically all live together, right? And so we were trying to do these metrics, just like Gary. I'm dealing with Bureau Happel. And this one, it's the opposite problem, Gary. It was like scaled up way too much, and they couldn't scale up. So we were looking at, at different metrics of open space collected with stormwater, and we're looking at all the different metrics. We started to envision what all these little stops could be. And then we started to do before and after. So Santa Monica, 43,000. In the year 2050, can we add almost 220,000 people? Can we actually spatialize it like that in a high density corridor? And the design here is the design of just massing, right? The massing is about quantitative sizing. So same thing, before and after. This is for those of you from LA. This is near UCLA in the country. This is what if we in the future the golf courses are now converted to public parks? This is like Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA, with a Peter Zumthor Museum there. What if we make this into a larger high-density sponge city? This is in Koreatown. What if we make this now into a rooftop urban agriculture? And then the focus of these type of studies is at a certain point there is going to be, oh, no way, we're not going to do that, a breaking point. And this was a breaking point where the numbers show something so ridiculous. This is not where you want to go. So this ended up being like this closed system. But the reason I'm showing you this and the thesis of this lecture is because we did this for about 2 years, this allowed us to do the next project I'm about to show you, because it's completely influenced this, which is NEOM, the line. Okay? So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this project. This is a project out in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, led by the new Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. He is 39 years old, or I think maybe he's actually 40 years old now. He was told that in about 50 years, Saudi Arabia will not have enough oil, and that condition is called peak oil. 50 years, that's 2 generations. So for him, we have to pivot into some sort of other new economic strategy. And so he created what they call giga projects. Giga projects are different urban projects with a different economic strategy in mind. And the one that is like the most advanced in terms of technology or attracting tech startups was NEOM. NEOM is the size of Belgium or the size of Massachusetts. And in 2019, we were called in, and halfway through a competition that was ongoing. So SOM, Stephanie Boyardi, there's like all these other guys that started a competition in November, and it was going to end around February. It was going to end around April. And we were called in with Zaha Hadid in February, halfway through the competition. And they said, if you want to do this, I'm going to invite you, but you're not getting a break in terms of what the final deliverables are. It's the same deliverables. I was like, oh, sure, why not? I mean, when's the next time you're going to get a chance to play in this ground? But there is something that Tom and I do when we're invited to a competition that we feel we're not going to win, which is we might be able to get second or third place. And this, I think, is the same line that I think I told you guys when I was talking about the Taipei competition. We're just going to put in all our wish list into this competition, and if we get second or third, when they announce whoever the winner is, maybe they'll say, oh, the second place where these guys called Morphosis, they were thinking about these crazy ideas, ha, 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 ha. It's too bad they didn't win it. But we were thinking we could actually piggyback on whoever the first place was, and maybe somebody can hear our ideas. So these were the 4. We're going to take the size of Belgium and only develop 4% of the land. Guess where that came from? That came from the Wilshire Corridor project at UCLA, where we say we're only going to develop 1% of the land. That's where it came from, because we had no time. We have no time, so we are using our UCLA 2 years worth of research to do this. Car-free, 5-minute walkable communities. That's exactly what we have for Wilshire, even though that was in LA. Anywhere you're going to go, 25 minutes. Guess what? That's from Santa Monica all the way to downtown LA. And then if you're going to build anything, it's not going to be neutral. It's going to be net positive, which at this point the technology really wasn't there. But we're like, okay, let's just go ahead and put it in. And in the end, we're like, okay, what's the most simple diagram? And we're like, okay, there's like actually 3 incredible geographic regions. It spans from the Red Sea all the way to the desert. And we're just going to shish kebab and stitch this. It's just, this wasn't any like 3rd level karmic intervention from the universe. It was just common sense. So we recognized that there were 3 different zones. And these are the actual photographs. This is the coastal islands. This is actually Neom. And then this is literally the mountain that we're going through. And this is the red desert. For those of you who ever saw the movie Dune, this was filmed here. Or the last 3 Star Wars movies, this was all filmed here. And we're like, you know what? I know every firm is going to do this because it's such a common sense thing to do, but we're going to do this. So we're going to stitch it. We stitched it, connected it. That's the 4%. We're going to leave 96%. I bet basically the head of OPEC is going to go crazy on this, right? And then we're going to say we're going to have 15 communities on an average of 80,000 people up and down the spine. And the big thing to understand is this. At this time, globally, everywhere in the world, every urban planner is using 2 square kilometers as the basic template to understand walkability. Okay, this is not my idea. This was like a global consensus. And so 2 square kilometers, if you square root that, that's 1.4 kilometers. Okay, each one of these maps is an actual true scale capture of what 1.4 kilometer captures you. So for those of you who are familiar with like London or Singapore or Seoul, you know the amount of area I just captured. There's a lot of activities there. There's a lot of culture. There's a lot of metrics there, right? That's what we're capturing. And so we decided to take one, and then we began to kind of understand this as from the centroid to walking out to the edge would be around 700 meters. And if we multiply that, that would actually be one of these communities. The center spine at this time was this new advanced Shinkansen bullet train from Japan that they were just announcing, a maglev Shinkansen going at 650 kilometers per hour. I saw that in YouTube. It's like, that's going to be my spine. So this was it. And all this is, there's nothing original about this. All we were inspired by were big American universities, UCLA, University of Michigan, because if you look at big universities in America especially, you have an entire ecosystem that is a walking ecosystem, right, of students going to classrooms, eating, with minimal cars. The cars are just basically there for servicing. So we did this and we laid it out. And of course the narrative was, as you can imagine, was pretty simple. You could go from, Milan to Jeddah and Paris all within one line. And so this was our first design. So it was this kind of complex, very informal collection and cluster of urbanity, going up and down a line. This was our first design for the first 1 year. So if you look up at the line right now, you're going to look at something else, right? It's this crazy mirror building. That is not what the original line is. Okay, the original line was this. It was meant to, we secretly wanted this to go forward so we could bring on like 200 of the world's best designers and urban planners, and everybody will come in and it'll be like just one massive design party, and everybody would be riffing off against each other, and we would actually have this collective city. And this was the final design. So after 1 year, and all this, in case you're wondering, was done with my graduate students. So this was a complete graduate student, a complete academic proposal. It was conceptually rich, and this is, in some miracle, this is how we ended up getting there. So after 1 year, The Crown Prince told me, Professor E, thank you very much for what you've offered, but I find it a little bit conservative. It's a little bit normal, isn't it? So he says I had a vision of something a lot more special, and this is what he came up with. So if you see this in social media, this is not any architect's idea. This was actually by the Crown Prince. And so this is where it's 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, and 170 kilometers long. If you're wondering, like a reference, the 9/11 World Trade Towers were 410 meters tall, so you can imagine how tall this is. So he said, Professor, if you want to continue to stay, your job is now to make this work. So the first rule was he wanted a series of these diagrams of a normative city versus what he calls the vertical urbanism. So there's about 20 of these diagrams. I'm just showing you two. And it just has to do with the idea that if you're on a regular city, your proximity is a 2D horizontal X and Y. But when you're in this theoretical floating vertical urbanism, it's X, Y, Z continuously. Your adjacency diagram in terms of different programmatic use is a lot more rich and varied, one could argue, right? So this is kind of like where we are. As of like the last couple of years, my team's been mandated to kind of work on this. For a lot of reasons that you can imagine, I cannot tell you more details. Suffice to say that this project is going through with a lot of other teams, and we'll see what happens. So I'm showing you this because we would not have been able to do this without the UCLA Wilshire exercise. I'm sure you come across in social media a lot of like musicians or athletes telling you that they were able to perform for that 2 seconds because they had 10,000 hours of practice, right? It's the same thing. We were able to do this not because we were such geniuses in those like 3 or 4 months. It's because we had the 2 years of research in an academic setting. So for me, academic research is critical because for me, that's always a preparation for real work. When the real work comes in, you have to be like a fireman. You have to be ready like in 2 minutes to do something. If you don't prep, that 2 minutes, you're going to die. So this is why I always think the relevancy of academia is really, really critical. Moving forward, in the same venue, we were tasked by this larger organization to look at food deserts. So again, we started to look at the research and the global issues on food equity has to do with this. I know the year's a little bit dated, but as the world's population is increasing, the agricultural land is decreasing, and we're having like this larger and larger gap, right? So we all know this. We all know this famous metric from the United Nations. By 2050, 80% is going to live in the cities. So we started to like really kind of map the carbon imprint and the amount of resources of just trying to import and export food. So on a global level, there is an exchange of at least 270 billion US dollars of just trying to get certain people that perfect blueberry, you know, when it's off season, or that perfect fruit when it's off season, right? And trying to basically bring some sort of equity, but is it really equity, or is it an inability to have a rhythm with seasons, right? So 70% of your retail price is caused by distribution and labor. And about 1/3 of the food product are wasted in distribution. There's a lot of these aesthetic components about contemporary food in Europe and in America that actually is somewhat kind of criminal. And the metrics keep on going, about 500, and now it's about 550 billion US dollars in fossil fuel of just distribution, and on and on. And I don't know if you noticed, but of all the fresh water consumed in the world, you think it's because the human beings need the fresh water? It's agriculture. So 70% of all the fresh water is for agriculture. So there's an amazing amount of resources. So I just showed you the global metrics. So now this is the U.S. metric. I'm coming from, Gary and I and all the USC guys, we're in California where the orange is. We're trying to export all our fruit and food to all the other peripheral states. I'm not even drawing in basically corn, wheat, and soy from the middle of the American belt into California. And if I were to zoom in into LA, I'm still bringing in an amazing amount of importing, amazing amount of fruit and produce into Los Angeles. So what are the local issues? So local issues is more about health. It's about health. I just told you about the health of the world because of the amount of distribution. The earth is dying. Well, here in LA, we got adults who are dying because of food inequities. So about 20% are overweight because of access to food, let alone the fact that they're not taking care of themselves. And about 3 times more supermarkets are in different socioeconomic neighborhoods, especially those with a white neighborhood. And so a lot of other politicians will tell you there's no food desert because you have fast food. Fast food is not food, right? So where can we bring basically a larger form of like healthy food? So this is what food desert is, right? It has to be with proximity, price, leakage, quality, choice, quantity, and alternatives. And that's basically the food desert imprint of LA. So we're trying to kind of mitigate the obesity of adults and of childhood. So out of all the strategies from passive to active, several groups have asked us, not that I believe in this as the only option, but it is one of the many options, which is urban farming, right? So urban farming in terms of a case for hydroponic systems. So hydroponic systems, somewhat divisive, somewhat controversial. The Japanese have been using this quite a bit for them to actually consolidate all their farming within the city. If you go to Tokyo, 1 out of maybe 6 buildings that look like an office building actually have a farm inside. So the advantage of hydroponics is that you have more field crops because there's more of a yield. There's like less spoilage of obviously smarter site, less energy, less water, and of course less pesticide. One of the most famous one is the Miyagi Plant Factory. For business reasons, another company has taken it over. And of course, here in the United States, we got one of the largest vertical farms out in New Jersey that's been supported by the Clinton administration so that they no longer have to import from California. So Aero Farms, started by my alma mater, has now been able to bring California produce to New York City rather than flying it over. So if in the 19th century we had this classic relationship, in the 21st century we have more and more of a distance. And so the argument is that, is it possible to kind of like fold it and to kind of like integrate it? And so there's a lot of other like indexes, like the very, very famous diagram from SITE, which talks about can you actually have a different ecosystem of urbanism that are layered. And of course, by now, we all know that there's a lot of these urban farmings that are on the rooftops of cities, like in Hong Kong. This is now, of course, a Singapore model, and of course, I just showed you the hydroponics. So on a research basis now, and working with the city of LA, these are some of the projects that we're doing with the through the Now Institute. So this was my job. This is actually a map I really love because this is a map where all the blue color are land that's owned by the city, but they're like leftover land. You know, they're like strangely shaped, or they're like too small, or they're next to other critical areas. So this is like downtown LA. So obviously like the larger squares are like the city hall and the convention center. But you go to different areas and you see these tiny little like blue lines, right? These are tiny little like half blocks that no developer will touch. They're like leftover like mounds of dirt. So where can we start like using this to kind of leverage certain kind of farming for the population? So we started to look at different kind of metric projects. So one of the ones that came up was a competition for this park in downtown LA called Pershing Square. And so we decided that we're actually going to invoke a tower that would actually showcase urban agriculture, and it would actually feed into a series of restaurants that could be almost like very high-end Michelin restaurants to elevate the discussion about sustainability, not through guilt, like you have to do it, not through like Catholic guilt, but through desire. So, hey, the food and the vegetables and the lettuce is going to taste so much better when you do this. Yes, we're feeding it into the Michelin restaurants just to like raise the larger cultural bar and to kind of showcase this. And we complete design basically this tower. And that one tower is like equivalent to like 25 acres of farming. The one problem with hydroponics is that it does not do root. Root is like potatoes, carrots. Okay, it does not do root, but it does do leaf, herb, and vine. And vine does include, like eggplants and tomatoes. So we're kind of limited to that, but that's fine. And the same metrics I just showed you, and we started to like create this. This one, we didn't win the competition. We came in second, and it became the talk of the town. The winning prize was a big piece of lawn. It was just a green carpet, so a different idea. We started to talk to churches because right now, as I don't know how it is here, but in the United States, being integrated with organized religion is decreasing quite a bit. So there's a decreasing amount of those who are going to churches and other temples. So all the churches are now asking for a different form of community outreach. So in this regard, it has to do now with regarding being agents of food equity. So this was like one board that we were creating to work with this one kind of community group, giving them basically different type of metrics that they would actually now use to actually self-fund for these systems. Another one was to work with LAUSD. So LA Unified School District, it came from the idea that if you taste ketchup when you're a little child, even as an adult, even if you're like this really seasoned like Michelin chef, your taste bud is deeply ingrained with like, let's say, like the sugary ketchup taste. But if you're as a young child and your parents gave you good fruit, good vegetables, and when you grow older, you will seek healthy food. It's like, how do you deeply ingrain food culture when you're young? And it begins with elementary school. So we decided to seed elementary schools with these urban farming units, and they would actually be able to touch tomatoes, kind of be competitive whose tomato is growing first or last. And that became now a method of seeding all the LAUSD schools up and down in downtown LA. This is actually near USC, guys. So you see USC over there, and this is how we chose all the schools and created basically this discussion point. I'll give you another example. This was a national competition in Taiwan. Again, everything I'm showing you is with students, just like you. So, national competition. The national government said, okay, we got basically this old dilapidated power plant. We wanted to do something new, but we are looking for a new idea rather than just like replacing the equipment. Anybody out there? So we said, okay, let's go in. We always start off with research. So the first thing we researched around this whole area was, let's look at shrimp. So in 1987, Taiwan had about 80 million tons of tiger black shrimp that they were exporting. They were number 2 in the world. That was 1987. In 2017, they fell off 80% because Vietnam, Indonesia, and China took over most of basically the shrimp farming metrics. This was a site that was given. And I told my team, what is this interesting pattern that's outside of the site? And of course, the answer was, it's like, these are these abandoned aquaculture farms. It was already there, and it was like a low-hanging fruit. So we decided that we're actually going to revive that and create a whole new integrated ecosystem where we realized that the water being warmed by the energy plant was the perfect temperature for the shrimp fry, which is another word for shrimp babies, to actually grow and mature. Okay, it was a perfect warm temperature. And the stabilization of the whole area was through the mangroves. And guess what? The shrimp fries, they love mangroves. So it became this whole landscape ecological revitalization strategy, shrimp business, and the ability to actually create a larger narrative about the power plant. So we did a complete landscape plus engineering integrated drawing that actually conjoined a larger ecosystem that even kind of netted a reasonable, modest amount of money. 30 million Taiwanese is not a lot of money. That's like $1 million US, okay? But it is just enough to kind of sustain this as a larger narrative. This was the model, and we ended up winning this. We ended up winning this as a nationwide. This was all open to every professional. And my students and I, we ended up winning this based on the argument. So what I wanted to tell you guys is that research and what we call problem formation, the formation of an argument goes a long way. Why? Because it allows politicians, mayors, governors, and presidents to use that argument as part of their public discussion and presentation. So this was basically what the image was. This is what we ended up winning. We ended up now distributing all these strategies all over the country. So I think I'm running out of time, but I had a Haiti now. But stop.
One more.
One more? Okay, last one. Haiti now. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the country. Haiti is that little black sea next to Cuba. It is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but it is also the first country that was formed by a slave revolt. It is the second country that was formed in the Western Hemisphere after the United States. In 2010, horrible earthquake, completely basically decimated the entire area. Michelle Obama sent us to see if her philosophy of getting back culture would actually aid the project. So I spent 8 years in Haiti. 8 years in Haiti, in and out, going in there almost once every 2 months for 8 years. And all these photos are all taken by my students. These are not Google photos. And there is an informality to the presence of an ecosystem in terms of lodging and energy. But the problem is, as you can imagine, there's only 26% that has what they call improved sanitation, which that's a UN term. All that means is that there's a hole in the ground. Okay. 15% legal electricity, which is even kind of optimistic. About 83% is in what we call informal housing. About 1% has piped water because most of the pipe system is from a Napoleon-era water. My focus with Michelle Obama was on the children. So at this point now, I would say about 30% were under the age of 18, so can we target them? So I was working with the United Nations, the World Bank, and UNESCO, and they said, Mr. Yi, I would advise you to pivot away from the capital city of Port-au-Prince, which was a total disaster and mess, and I would ask you to go up to Cap-Haïtien, which was the original capital city when this was Napoleon's colony. Coffee, 50% of the world's coffee and sugar were supplied by Haiti during the French colonial period. So if you go here, this is actually the photos of Cap-Haïtien. So a lot of the buildings are preserved. This, by the way, was the template for the French Quarter in New Orleans, ironically. After the slaves fought Napoleon and was victorious, psychologically, they were uncomfortable with creating fortresses along the beach. They decided to go up the mountain and build fortresses up in the mountain peaks. The largest castles and fortresses in the Western Hemisphere are the ones in Haiti. And this is one of the most famous ones called the Citadel. These are photos that I took, and on each peak is one of these fortresses, because they thought Napoleon was going to come back for revenge. He never did. So we were asked now to look at how to revise this. The problem was this river. And he's my friend who's been helping me out. This is the River Mapu. So about 15 years ago, this was actually a clear water. It was moving about 20 years ago. Because of Port-au-Prince's earthquake, everybody migrated up there and basically ended up using the river as their toilet, as their trash. It just became everything. It became basically a black sludge in 20 years. And so yeah, my first homework was trying to kind of resolve this. I said, okay, we'll do this. Let me bring in basically my expert of Korean government water specialist. So these guys came in and they started to basically test all the waters. It turned out that the water was actually clean only if I remove every man-made impurities, right? So if I resolve the trash system, the velocity of the water in basically 2 to 3 months could clear and flush out the system. So that was actually good news. So in order to kind of map out this whole thing, I needed a map, right? So I went back to the UN, UNESCO, everybody's like, is there a map? They said there's no map. So this is why you need to be good friends with your friends in graduate school. Because my friend in graduate school was one of the 5 guys who came up with a program called GIS, ArcGIS, made by a company called Esri, and he was one of 5. And he goes like, I think I could help you. We're right now beta testing the software that basically, at that time, it was early AI, but they would never use the word AI. They would actually analyze shadows to see how tall buildings are. But because it's so small, you still have to trace everything. So my students ended up retracing Esri satellite maps because Google was not covering Haiti. So we were retracing all this. We're retracing every building. And what became really useful was when you start to look at these buildings at the bottom of the picture, like these on the outliers, these are clearly, they're illegal buildings, right? These became really, really critical because we ended up now making like these simple polygons. And what we ended up doing was that each one of those red blocks was one of these huts on the left-hand side. So I would go up with, like, let's say 3 of you. I would march up. They will see, like, this Asian guy, you know, completely alien. I probably look lost. So they are now talking to me. Meanwhile, I have 3 of you go on the side. One of you look past the curtain, count immediately how many beds there are because the bed sheets are white against a dark shadow. 1, 2, 3 beds, and you do a GPS lock. Okay? Out of maybe 10 polygons, we could do about 6. So statistically, if I do 6 out of 10, I could basically project through probability what the population is. This is how I did it. And then I'm talking to the mayor. You could see he is completely not convinced that basically he needs my map, right? And I'm pleading with him. These are all my students. They're just like you. But the urban planner is super happy. He's ecstatic because it's the first time he actually has a true map. We make multiple copies of this, and we're now distributing it to all the locals. They are now mapping out these wells because the river is so polluted. The number one need of the people was temporary clean water wells, right? And so my Korean guys are testing this thing, but what's the problem? A lot of these rich families, they ended up hiding these water wells by building walls around them. So no one knows where all the water wells were. So we had this crazy idea of bringing down from LA 30 soccer balls, footballs, with no air. We brought them in, and we told each one of the children, if you find me 1 well, I'll give you 1 football, right? Greatest human navigation tool, right? They found all 30 wells. And I say, if somebody finds me the well of that really rich family, I'll give you the pump. Because whoever holds the pump is the king of the neighborhood, right? The pump got me that well. And then we started to map everything out, and it became really important. Meanwhile, we had another team underneath me. We were trying to understand culture, right? But there's no books. So we realized we had to make our own book about Haiti. This was 700 pages, and we ended up is not about me writing. This is me as an editor saying to all the leadership, to the professors, to the intelligentsia, to the intellects of Haiti, I know you all wanted an outlet. Let me give you an outlet. Okay, each one of you, you write something, and I will put it in a book, and I will sell this on Amazon. So we ended up doing that. That became successful. And then finally, our third piece to deal with kid safety and education was a one-stop shopping that they call the Life Tree. So we call the Life Tree, where can you go? Toilet, water, energy, and where can it be like a safe place? So we had the support of Madame Pierre-Louis. She was the only female prime minister of Haiti. She goes, Professor E, I will support you, but I'm going to ask you to do something a little bit crazy. It's like, what is that? I need you to come to this park I have called Parc Martissant. That park is this oasis where only women and children are allowed. No men are allowed. Men are guarding the perimeter with guns because that entire area is run by 3 gangs that are continuously fighting and killing each other. 1 square is 1,000 people. So, Professor E, I want you to come in. I'm going to give you 2 sites to put in your special water tank for fresh water. And it was just a simple design. It's a 10-meter water tank, really, really old-fashioned. But what that logo was this Korean company that was giving me what Seoul uses. The city of Seoul uses this technology to filter all their water for their people. And I figured if it's good for Korea, it's going to be good here, right? But they needed gravity 10 meters tall to push the water through this membrane filter, and that's where the 10-meter height came in. We're building this thing, so why don't we just make it into this collective entertainment education area? The problem is this: when the children are in their houses behind, in the middle of the night, it's so hot they have to go outside. There's no electricity, so they cannot study. Candlelight is not going to be enough, and once they come out, guess what happens? They get kidnapped, and they get picked up by the gangs. So this is a place where we wanted them to come in, and we ended up building this 10-story tank. And so this is COVID, May 2019, up there on a field test. Guess what happens? They made a big mistake. There's 2 creases, right? It was supposed to be flat because it was supposed to be a screen, right? It's supposed to look like this, but they didn't. But guess what? As we all know, it's May 2019. COVID just began. So this is where, like, for me, the little heartbreak is because we built everything. The building next door was this dilapidated building. We rebuilt that. We made that into a music school. And this is an interesting picture because on the left-hand side is where the gangs are, right? In here was the oasis for the children. And the whole idea was that at least we were able to pilot test like 2 lights that would actually always try to be green. And of course, this part is a rendering. But the idea is that you will always have these 2, and that wherever you go, wherever you see the blue light, this is where you could go for safety and clean water. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you. That was really very, very different, in some ways very different talks, but also a really common theme running through both of them. I think it's this extraordinary kind of research that goes into the projects and the kind of diagramming that's involved. So I thought it was really interesting. That's why I wanted you to show the final project. Okay, it's a little bit late, but we've got time for some questions from the audience here. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask Gary or Yi? Here we go. Good.
For Gary, I have a question regarding the affordability part of the housing, the flex housing. I was wondering if that kind of models of affordability can be used for the housing crisis in America, for example, right now, that a lot of people cannot afford housings, and those kind of affordability prices actually viable for people that do not have enough income to use those models in real life.
Yeah, that's a good question. the first, the housing crisis I'll say in LA, but it extends beyond LA for sure, is significant and severe. And there are things, well, and I'll just say, when at SciArc, I used to run the housing studio there, and we worked with multi-unit, all different types of multi-unit housing, I think, which is pertinent to your question. The solar decathlon, unfortunately, and this is something that I was a little critical of, like the case study, the original John Intenza case study project, was predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly about single-family dwellings. And even though the aspiration behind Intenza or the Art and Architecture case study project was to do essentially low-cost modern housing, they ended up being in exclusive neighborhoods and for fairly exclusive clientele more often than not. There were a couple of multi-unit projects at the end of the case study that are quite interesting. One in Phoenix that's worth looking up and studying if this is a topic you're interested in. But I think the brief answer is what we've been looking at are low-rise, high-density models of urbanism, which would maximize the amount of dwelling possibilities in a place like Los Angeles, on typical suburban sites or liminal sites that E was talking about. We've done a number of projects and studies of how you build on these sites adjacent to freeways or leftovers on old railroad train right-of-ways. And there's I think a lot of potential in there. Whether that would make a significant dent in the housing crisis is, it would be a start, and I think it would be an important model. The mayor before the current mayor had studied city planning and made it one of his important projects, but nothing really came of it. And again, there's all sorts of reasons. I'll just conclude by saying we definitely learn things by doing the decathlon project that I think can be applied to the housing crisis. And when I look back at some of the things in that project that I would do differently, one of them would be to make the house much smaller than we did, which was a possibility. So a lot of the research we've been doing is in micro dwellings, and so how do you design a house 500 or 350 square feet that could work for an intergenerational family or has the flexibility to work for roommates or nuclear families or different living scenarios? I think is also really important than just what we see, trailers that are bridge housing or transitional housing, tents and so forth, none of which really reflect, I think, much research or innovation in architectural terms.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Any more questions, please? One here. And just pass that back. There's one already, I think. You got it?
Thank you. I want to ask a question for Professor Yi. You show in the lecture that research is very important for making architecture development. So I want to ask, how you scope and plan for the research when you need some information. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the basis for this whole lecture, like when you go and see a doctor, the doctor gives you a big medical check, and they say, oh, you have a cold, so you could take like a little medicine, or you need to lose weight, so just go back home and eat better food, right? There is a larger assessment of the city where we are trying to locate solutions that is first within the community and culture. I don't like the idea of an external solution coming in artificially. That is an equivalent in medical terms of doing a very invasive surgery, right? You have to do surgery sometimes, but it's the last resort, right? You want to change your lifestyle. You want to maybe eat better, right? Or maybe, just get some more medicine. So using the same analogy, research allows us to fully understand the local culture and the local demographics. And when you actually have that, and when you actually now come up with some sort of a strategy, the strategy is coming from the locality. It's not coming in from an outside abstraction. So when a strategy is now fully finished, it's a very easy communication. One of the things I didn't tell you is that in Haiti, I quickly realized there were 420 NGOs all running around trying to save Haiti. Half of them were religious groups saying, voodoo is bad, Buddha, da. But they were not even talking to the locals. I realized my easiest thing was to talk to the midwives. Do you know what a midwife is? A midwife is in a village, these special women who help women have babies. Okay, they're very important culturally because they control the entire gossip power structure of a group. Once I became friends with a midwife, no one would bother me. They would tell me exactly what to do. And that actually made me into much more of an integrated member of the village, right? So this is basically what you have to do.
Thank you. Any more? Here, question here.
Yeah, I had a question. So when looking at the city like Neom, the line, it's a vertical city, and you're proposing an idea that's not necessarily been done before and executed in the XYZ plane, as you said.
The Crown Prince is proposing an idea.
Yes, but if you're trying to convince them and show exactly how you would execute it when something hasn't been seen or been fully done before, how do you demonstrate that confidence and show, I guess, a plan of how you would execute it?
Either the official answer or the real answer, but I'm bound by the official answer. So Chloe asked basically on a project like Neom that is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, how do you basically balance the ecosystem? And there's no mystery to this. Within the industry, we have these things called KPIs. So KPIs, who I'm sure most of you know, it's key performance indicators, right? Like, what's a KPI of just human comfort? For different cultures, it's maybe 24 degrees Celsius. Out there, they are very comfortable with 28 degrees Celsius, right? So what is that KPI target, right? And as long as you have some key KPIs and how much somebody's willing to walk to buy milk, right? Those are the KPIs you always measure against. And if a design fails to do that, then it fails. All I could tell you for everybody who is wondering is we're still trying to make certain things work.
Okay, thank you. Any more? I have a quick last question myself, actually. I mean, I think for both of you somehow, you can choose who answers it, but both of what you're doing, all this sort of amazing research, that sort of depth of research behind a lot of the projects you've looked at, touches many, many different disciplines, not just sort of architecture in a conventional sense. And I wonder if that's something that's drawing you as architects into new disciplines, or you pull disciplines into the frame of architecture to solve some of these problems.
Well, for me, I'm interested in multidisciplinary research and always have been. And I'm just, I think, a naturally inquisitive guy who likes to be learning about things. And so for me, I think it's it's just part of how we work, is to look at the arts and to look at the sciences and to look at culture, understanding that some of the problems we're talking about are truly wicked problems, like homelessness and so forth. And so to be reductive, I think, does it a disservice. But also it's, I think, a way to create work of greater density and meaning by drawing from different sources and different frames of reference. So we look at capital A architecture. I'll say for the net zero, the Flux Home project. We'd call exemplary architecture works, but we also are very much interested in the vernacular and what we can learn from that, and as well as our predecessors, which is why I showed Ralph Knoll's slide, which was a really important, I think, piece of research having to do with performance and form and solar energy. So I just think it's something that a critical practice would always do. I hope.
I think, like in the Now Institute, there is two specific kind of thought direction and leadership. So Tom Main is interested in the larger physical spatiality of what urbanism can be, because I think after the 1970s, there has been a clear split within the profession of those, shall we say, urban planning, where we joke that there is more of a policy-driven versus urban design, which is much more spatial. But there's now this extra plus delta, which is the spatiality needs a narrative. And so for me, I've been very informed in my earlier education on the larger narrative side of it, the ability for different complex demographics, socioeconomics, the ebbs and flows of politics going from up and down, up and down. And rather than some people saying, it's like, how can you do that because it's so crazy, it's unpredictable, is like, how can you then design a flexible system that could adapt that? And that has always been where my interest is. And one of that ability to be flexible and resilient is research data, everything from a slightly more cliche version of empathy all the way to a deep science of understanding larger migratory or community patterns and how each community values different things. I always tell my students, you're always going to be dealing with these two binary issues where technology aims to be ubiquitous. Somehow everybody needs flushing toilet, electricity, access to information. That's ubiquity. But then the human nature forces us to also be differentiated. We like our own identity. If my friend and I wear the same clothing, I'll feel a bit awkward. Because I think the idea about identity versus ubiquity or differentiation, I think that has always been the two sides. And the only way to understand that is through research or understanding the locality.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, well, look, I'm going to wrap it up now. Just say a very thank you to our guests for that talk tonight, which I thought was very really nice insight into the way you work and just seeing all the kind of processes that go behind the projects. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't quite finish there yet. Unfortunately, I'm nearly finished. But just quickly for me to say, just to announce the next lecture next week in the same series. And the next will be by Greg Smallenberg, founding principal of PFS Studio, titled Leading with Landscape, which focuses on the power of collaboration, the advantages of layering landscape over infrastructure, and the importance of integrated art. That is next Wednesday, 29th of October, same time, maybe a little bit shorter, here in the library auditorium. Lecture series, knowledge Knowledge management, K or KM, is available on the Faculty of Architecture's website and YouTube channel.